There's a question from San Diego City Attorney Micah Gary.
Thank you. Maureen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of what influences you, what you read, how you spend your day, how much time you devote to your column, and then how you spend the rest of your time?
Wow.
Can you give a précis of Mike's question?
Oh, he was just asking what I read and how I spend my time, which sounds like it might be boring for you guys.
No, we'd like to hear.
Well, lately I've been reading, this is why it's funny to me that when Bush's reading list came out, there weren't more books like this, but I'm just desperately trying to keep up with all the books, The Looming Tower by Lawrence Wright, which explains the whole Al-Qaeda thing, and Fiasco by Tom Ricks at the Washington Post, who's a fantastic reporter. And my friend Michael Isikoff has just done Hubris, and now, I got a copy of Woodward's book with Dennis's help, which I'm going to read on the plane. And I've been reading books by soldiers, who have been in Iraq to try and figure out what it's like there, because our reporters are so circumscribed and pinioned that it's really hard to tell exactly what the situation is. So I think we were all taken to a place that, for me anyway, most of my knowledge about that part of the world came from Lawrence of Arabia, which you could learn a lot from. I wish Bush would screen that. But so I think, like all other Americans, I'm trying to learn about this thicket and trellis of tribal and religious jealousies going back centuries, and how this is affecting us. We're going to be there for a generation. And I feel like I'm in a remedial college course, trying to learn Middle East history. And I'm not a foreign affairs writer. I was sort of taken into it. In Bush World, I wrote about what I called the Ocean's 9/11 heist of the neocons by half a century of American foreign policy. And that was the part that fascinated me, how they were able to kind of get that away from the president, who was a little bit naive and just didn't know enough about foreign policy to stop them. And so then they took us to the Middle East, and now I'm trying to catch up and learn about Osama, although, again, I'll never understand why we didn't go after Osama. That to me seemed the key thing where we went off the rails.
Is there a question from outside, maybe? Sir?
Could I ask you both as journalists to say something about the precarious nature of fact in today's society? I'm talking about that famous comment about the reality-based community.
Right. Yeah.
And, in Maureen's column today, she mentioned all these books that you just mentioned again. And my question is, so what? If they're just not going to listen to fact and go over everybody's head,
Right. The question, it's a huge one, is what has happened to fact? And the questioner cited, it actually comes from a New York Times magazine piece right before the 2004 election that Ron Suskind, who also recently wrote a very powerful book about the administration, he quoted a senior Bush White House official basically saying to Ron, a journalist, like, you in the reality-based community think that, you can hold us to account, and while you're mulling and criticizing us, we just take action. While you're sitting there trying to ferret out the facts, we act. And it was a very bold quote, and a very disturbing one that the citing of this concept of a reality-based community, what other kind of community is there? So, but clearly, this is an administration that has been very adept at shaping their own reality, and they use tools, whether it's Fox News or other vehicles, to amplify a message. But where do the facts have a chance of surviving? And tell us a little bit about how that White House machine works, and what your take is on we in the reality-based community. Really frightening that they could just say that everything, you know, that Saddam had weapons when it was clear that this might, you know, was just something they were using to scare people, but it was about our security. And then afterwards, all these years afterwards, they keep saying that things are going well, and that's what Woodward, you know, belatedly is kind of now agreeing with, and he talks about 4 assessments that Rumsfeld and the president and Condi got from people they really trust, from best friends or from, you know, their best friends or top advisors that told them things were not going well, and yet they keep going out and telling the American people that things are going well, which just makes me really sad and crazy, because I think our kids they're dying, and unless they admit what the true state of affairs is, they can't change the battle plan. And if they, you know, they'd rather kind of bullet through and act all macho like everything is fine, and that's why they're not firing Rummy, then admit that things are bad and change the plans so that we can get out of there. And that's still going on to this day. And it is, you know, when historians look back, the press will be held accountable for not pushing harder, and you know, this administration will be held accountable for making up a reality that Americans, if they were well informed, should just be able to see through. It's not so hard to see through it. All you need to do is, you know, I think Katrina is a great example, because in Katrina they were trying to say everything was fine, but you could look at CNN and see things were not fine. People were dying. And so I think it's harder with Iraq because they don't let you see the body bags coming home. We can't cover most 95% of what's happening, and we keep listening to, you know, these generals saying things are okay, although now that's starting to break up. A lot of the generals are saying things aren't okay. But I think this will go down as one of the most amazing periods of history, that they were able to create this fake Potemkin reality where everything was going fine when everything was really, as one Bush administration person who was in Iraq put it, going to hell in a handbasket. And that was 4 years ago.
Yeah. Wait.
Yes,
We'll come back this way,
but
but
your column this morning about Sasha Cohen. I was wondering, you know, since I've read your column forever, but it seems like, as you said the other morning, you've become a celebrity. I mean, if you feel indebted to the incompetence and ignorance of the Bushies in any way for supplying this material, this endless material.
the question is whether Maureen feels deeply indebted to the Bush administration for supplying such fabulous material.
I mean, I covered the first Bush White House as a New York Times White House reporter, and I always felt a little sad that my trajectory in journalism reached the White House. Had put in enough years to be a White House reporter at the very moment Bush Sr. was the president, because his presidency, I wanted someone dark and interesting and twisted like Nixon or Johnson or, you know, and I got Bush Sr., who was always, was writing stories about whether he liked broccoli, and he was taking showers with his puppies, and even his war was very kind of video game sanitized, and there just wasn't any Shakespearean grist to it. But it is a case of be careful what you wish for, because I got that with his son. And it is, to me, an amazing, mythic, Shakespearean tragedy. You know, that sometimes, I can never decide which, should Shakespeare be writing it or Evelyn Waugh, because it's at moments farcical and at moments, you know, tragedy. And I'm a citizen. So as a citizen, I get really appalled. But as a journalist, I love Rummy to death.